Hello, my name is Julie Wong, and I'm beyond excited to welcome Erika Thormahlen and Jeremy Konner to have a conversation about Waffles and Mochi, their Netflix show hosted by Michelle Obama. Released in March 2021, they are the co-creators and executive producers of Waffles and Mochi, two curious and culinary puppets who travel the world exploring the wonders of food and culture while learning how to cook with fresh ingredients. Erika began her career as an actress, receiving a master's in education at New York University before teaching preschool. She then spent over a decade as a copywriter for fashion, beauty, and travel brands in New York City and Tokyo. She's currently working on her first novel. Jeremy Konner is a writer, director, and producer, most well known for co-creating the Emmy Award-winning series Drunk History on Comedy Central, produced by Will Ferrell and Adam McKay. His other works include Another Period, Ghost Girls, music videos, along with comedy segments for Jimmy Kimmel Live and the HBO series Funny or Die Presents. A warm and virtual Google Talk welcome to my childhood friend, Erika, and Jeremy. I can't tell you how much my family has enjoyed watching the series. It's creative, fun, and educational, learning about 10 major ingredients that we regularly consume. Thank you so much for joining us.
We're excited to be here.
So can you start by sharing your journey and how you two met and created these incredible characters?
Yeah, I can start. Jeremy and I go way, 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 way back. I think we met each other as friends in that period after college. My roommate was Jeremy's best friend. I was taking a class trying to find myself. It was in children's wear design, and I got this homework assignment to go home and dream up a couple of characters. And out of that came a version of Waffles and Mochi that Jeremy and I took with the help of our friends in a very kind of creative, homegrown way. And we created a short film around these two puppets that cook in their kitchen, and they go on these food trips. And yeah, that's sort of where it all started. It was kind of a happy accident in that fun, organic way of just play.
But it didn't go.
No,
It didn't happen. That was not the success story. That lay dormant for how long? 14, 15 years?
Yeah.
And then I ran into Erika at a restaurant, and I had a 4-year-old, and I was like, oh, it's crazy. I wish that show existed right now. That would really help me, because I was dealing with, a picky eater. And also, originally, it had sort of gotten held back or killed, however you want to call it, because people were saying you can't have kids in a kitchen, and you can't have kids anywhere near, that kind of knives or flame or anything like that. It just seemed like that was a non-starter. And since then, there's 1,000 television shows. There's Top Chef Junior and Master Chef Junior, and everything is kids cooking. It's a huge, part of our entertainment landscape now. So when we reconnected, we kept thinking, this is a pitchable show now. What was once not pitchable is now feels very pitchable. So we started developing it bi-coastally. Erika was in New York and I was in LA, and we had no deadlines or anything. It was just like a fun experiment where we would sort of just like pass it back and forth and be like, what would a crazy show be like? This would be fun.
That's so cool to hear. I mean, what were some of your inspirations for the show, either before you came up with the idea and while you were, collaborating across the country?
I think always embedded in the show was our shared love of our own children's programming that we grew up on. I was a big fan of Pee-wee's Playhouse. My folks, I remember my dad would get up early with me and watch. We're huge fans of what is now vintage Sesame. And then when we reconnected, Jeremy had sort of opened my eyes to all of the food content that was out there. Of course, when the show was originally conceived, Food Network was all that there really was on television. But again, in the 15 years or so that went by, suddenly there were shows like, Anthony Bourdain was on air. Jeremy introduced me to Ugly Delicious. And we got excited about the idea of not only teaching kids how to cook in a kitchen, but also bringing them out into the world, like some of our favorite shows do in terms of those travelogue television shows. And so, there's just a ton. It was like a grab bag of all the things that we loved about puppets and cooking and travel.
Great. Well, I heard that Erika once pitched the idea to her manager at Sesame Street, and it was your idea was turned down. So how did you continue to pursue this dream after that rejection and maybe some other rejections?
Yeah, I mean, it was such a labor of love. It was such a fun thing to work on in those early days because it was really developed and created with friends, and we really didn't have our sights set on much other than just doing something fun together. But then the idea really took hold, and I know Jeremy and I still feel this way about it. We saw it as an opportunity to revolutionize how kids eat and how they relate to food. So I think we both went in pretty blindly, and I know I did when I, was working at Sesame Street, really low on the ladder. And it was not my manager, but my manager's boss. My manager was lovely. She was like, go, chat it up with the person in charge. But like Jeremy said, they weren't interested. They sort of handheld me through the process of all the liabilities at the time, having kids, introducing kids to a kitchen. And truth be told, like Jeremy said, it was just dead in the water. And putting a dream to rest is a really, for me, there was a process of grief, because it's something I was really attached to. And I was sad that other people didn't see it our way. But, I think to Jeremy's point, the times caught up with us, so to speak. Now there's tons of cooking shows out there for kids, and we just seized on that window.
Definitely. I think there's so much to be said about having a dream and not being able to move forward with it. And I think a lot of people in our audience might be able to resonate with that. And I think it's just so inspirational that you held on to that passion and pursued it. And so, now I'd love to hear, what was the pitch process like after reconnecting with each other? I think Jeremy has this pretty cool story.
Well, by the way, it was killed again. Like it was pretty much killed. We went and I sent it to my agents and managers. I had just done Drunk History, now 5 seasons of that show. So now I had a little bit under my belt. And I also had like a weird cachet, a little bit of a cachet of like making education fun. People sort of could see me that way. So I thought this would be in the bag. But everybody who read it from my like agents and managers were like, what are you doing? You're doing a kids show with puppets? And we sent it to a bunch of companies, production companies, this deck that we had created, which I thought it was a really beautiful deck. And we had an artist draw it, and we're really proud of that. And we sent it around, and it was crickets. There was no response. It was not, people didn't pass. So that was nice.
We just didn't hear back from them.
Yeah. So we didn't hear anything, and it felt like, all right, well, I guess that was a fun try. We tried again. And then we read that this woman, Priya Swaminathan, had been tapped to run Obama's company, Higher Ground. And Priya is someone that I met years ago. We had been on the panel at South by Southwest. We were flown out to do this panel, and it was like in a hall for 400 people or something. And we got out on stage, and there were literally 4 people in the audience. and it was just us on stage. And it was a panel called the Art of Selling Out, which we all felt a little bit strange that we were participating in that. But then we were also like, it was a nice way of saying, or maybe not a great way of saying, people who are making money for their art. That's what we did. She was working at the time as the head of Annapurna for Megan Ellison's company. So we decided, let's just send it to her and just see what happens. I mean, this was like days after it had been announced, maybe the day it was announced that she was stepping up into this role. And we sent it to her because I knew her from this panel, and we had like a lovely barbecue lunch afterwards. And we got a call like the next day saying, this is exactly what we're looking for. This is perfect. And we met with her a week later, and she was like, oh, Michelle and Barack think this is the greatest thing. They weren't even, thinking they'd do a television show for kids, but now they're so excited about kids. You guys, Michelle and Barack want this to be their first television show that they ever make. And Michelle wants to be in every episode. This is crazy. It's unbelievable. And so then we went to Netflix with them, and Netflix was sort of said, yeah, go make 10 episodes.
Yeah, it's such an inspiring story about, never giving up on your dream, the timing that, even years after the creation of these characters, that the timing was so important. And then also like your resources and your network, having met this one person on this panel years prior and, just reaching out to her in that moment, that it just clicked. So I really think that story is powerful, putting your energy out in the universe and manifesting that. It's really cool. I mean, at this point, I'd love to hear next, what was it like to collaborate with Mrs. Obama? I know there were probably so many challenges, but also so many great opportunities.
Well, the first challenge was arriving at the meeting not perspiring. I remember Jeremy and I were sent to Washington, D.C. to meet and talk with her and her team. And I asked if we'd stop at Rite Aid to go get some extra strength deodorant. We were really nervous to work with Mrs. Obama. She was on not even our mood board. She was just kind of our patron saint of kids and cooking. So for her to be excited about this idea just sent shivers through us. And that meeting, we didn't really quite know what to expect, but when we sat down with her, it was so incredible because she really just listened to all of our wacky ideas. I mean, there we were talking about sending 2 puppets around the world. And she shared her food experiences. I mean, she talked about her childhood favorite foods and her least favorite foods, and how she would sit at the table with a plate of lima beans in front of her and gag. I mean, it was just really fun to just talk and connect over food. And out of that discussion, I know she really brought our attention to the idea of how a child's palate develops over time. And we got talking about our taste buds and this idea, kind of like an inside out take on the tongue's taste buds, came out of that talk. And if you've seen the show, you know that we fly into Mochi's mouth and we get to meet his 5 buds and get to know how they experience food through this really fun kind of cartoonish way. And that came out of our talk with Mrs. Obama. That was right out of her mouth, so to speak.
And we were told that we would have 15 minutes to talk to her. They were sort of prepped us like she has 15-minute increments. That's how her meetings work. She's one of the busiest humans alive, and that's how much time you'll get. So we went in sort of not sure how a 15-minute meeting would be possible, but we went in and then we walked out like an hour and a half later, and it was like the most casual, fun, easygoing conversation. it was great. It was great. Everything about her has been exactly how we want it to be when we're in with her. You know, she's so friendly and wonderful. And when you're in that room, you really do forget who she is. And then the second you're like away from her, you're like, what is happening? How did this happen? Why are we talking to her? Why are we allowed near her? But then she comes back and when we have the best time.
Yeah, she has obviously so much charisma. She really, it's so fun to see her playful with the characters in the show and to see her so engaging. I'm sure she probably went off script and ad-libbed, you know, I can imagine her just knowing what to say.
That was not an easy decision on our part to say, Ms. Obama, we don't want to give you lines. We're going to write lines, but then we really don't want you to say them. We want you to just talk how you would talk, which I think was like, we had a lot of conversations about whether or not that would even be okay to ask her to do that. That's a very strange thing to say. You're going to be on camera, you're going to be acting. You're not an actor. And also you're going to be writing all your lines. But that she totally got it. And that was exactly the right move. Like the way that she's going to tell kids that, you know, patience is important or whatever these lessons are, that just the way she talks is just so real and so much better than anything we ever could have written.
Yeah, she's so natural. You know, she was born to do this. So, you know, I moving on, I'd love to hear more about the diversity of the chefs, the countries, and the children represented. You know, how important was it to reflect food, history, and culture from so many different parts of the world?
Yeah, well, we couldn't tell the story of food without inviting everyone to the table, literally and figuratively. So there was no world in which we were doing a show about food without bringing as many voices and palettes and ingredients, and hopefully threading this connection that we kind of all eat the same thing, you know, in one way or another, and that we're all connected through what's on our plate. So that was always intentional, and we had an amazing team of producers and researchers that would share in really cool people, known and unknown, that we could visit and Waffles and Mochi could meet with and learn about food. So, I mean, if you had walked into our writer's room, it would have looked like a beautiful mind with a lot of, you know, delicious food and places, you know, with maps and pins, and piecing it together was challenging, of course, because we did have a budget and we had a timeline, and luckily we made it all in before the pandemic hit. So we got all that travel in before the world shut down. But yeah, every person we featured or met with was a really intentional thing on our part, because you couldn't tell the story of food without everyone getting a chance to talk about their experience with it.
Yeah, I think it was really fun to watch the show during the pandemic and get a tour around the world with the kids, you know, so there was a lot of learning, a lot of lessons, a lot of growth. And as a parent, you know, the education piece is always, you know, the winner here. So, so I really appreciated that. You know, what was the process of selecting the ingredients? And before you answer that, you know, I was talking with my kids in preparation for this, and they were talking about, well, why wasn't broccoli featured? There are so many kids love broccoli. Or, you know, maybe I would talk about cauliflower because some people don't like it and it's a really great vegetable. Or my son was saying, well, Brussels sprouts, because they're small, they look funny, and they have lots of overlapping layers. And my daughter was questioning, you know, what about fruits? I love fruits. And, you know, we did talk about, well, some vegetables can be fruits. And, you know, we were talking about tomatoes and other things, but she was talking about sweet and delicious fruits. So, you know, I'd love to hear what that selection process was like.
Yeah, just piggybacking off of what you were saying, Erika, that we wanted to, so it was so important, this you know, this first, going out of the gate with this show that this was really showing how the whole world ate. And what that meant was also finding ingredients that really felt global. And whether it was ingredients that just changed the entire globe and were sort of like just, moved countries kind of thing, where it was like, yeah, it's salt. Like it's the biggest ingredient ever. Like every single human on earth is cooking with salt. There's rice all over the world. There is really not a country that's like not using rice. Maybe one or two or something, that we really went out of our way to find ingredients that almost everybody on this planet is using in some way or another. Which is what our sort of guiding light was for the whole season. And that's why we really chose those ones. Yeah, Erika.
Yeah, no, I mean, when we blue skied our ingredients, there were just too many to choose from. So once we settled on this idea of we were going to choose foods that we all are eating, suddenly we had a little bit of a track and we had a yardstick to measure ingredients by. For instance, we went in really wanting to tell the story of apples and how they originated in Afghanistan. And we were really excited to visit these ancient apple orchards in that region. And then once we got into our room to sort of research and dissect how apples maybe changed the world, in our estimation, they didn't to the degree that we were looking for. There's some really cool stories about, and then Jeremy.
No, they did.
Yes.
Mostly because of boots. That's like Johnny Appleseed and going around America and everybody having apple trees and growing apples. That was really the story of alcohol.
Which fits in drunk history, not
which
in
I was stealing. But yeah, no, it just didn't seem like, again, this could totally eventually happen. Probably not the alcohol part, but doing something on apples and stuff. It was more just first season. We wanted the biggest things. I mean, we have an episode about water. Like,
Yeah.
That's how broad and global we want it to be.
Yeah. It's such a powerful episode too, about the way people use it and the way people in certain countries don't have the same access to it. So I think you guys did an incredible job narrowing down 10 ingredients out of, the millions that you probably had on your whiteboards. So can you explain some of the challenges in working with puppets and highlight maybe what the most difficult scene to shoot was?
I mean, puppets are a joy, except when you want them to travel, eat. We love our puppets, but we broke the cardinal rule of, I think, puppetry in perpetuity, in that most puppets don't interact with real foods. And one of the standards of our show is that we wanted Waffles to actually consume food. We needed her to be a proxy for the viewer. And so we needed her eating to be realistic. We love Cookie Monster and we love when he eats his rice cake cookies. But we wanted her to savor food just like we would if we were sitting down at a table with Massimo Bottura. So puppets are made of fabric. And if you've ever stained your blouse while eating spaghetti, to travel with some shout wipes. And our puppet crew had tons of Tide wipes and all sorts of, Jeremy, I know you like talking about the different appendages we traveled with. Waffles has multitudes of arms and sometimes heads.
Mouths. We had replaceable mouths that she could use.
Yeah, so we were kind of shooting guerrilla style. Our puppeteers were tucked under Japanese fish markets and cramped in Peruvian egg stalls. It was high in the Andes. I know Jeremy and I lucked out in that we were asked to go to Washington, D.C. while the rest of our crew went to Peru. We were really bummed out at first because, of course, who's wants to miss out on Peru. But then our whole crew got food poisoning, 8,000 feet in the air on the side of a mountain. And it's tough to make a show with puppets traveling around the world.
Yeah, I can't imagine. They're the most beautiful designed puppets and so colorful. I love how you guys intentionally created them in certain colors, as male and female, to share some of those lessons as well. So one of my favorite episodes was about eggs, because not only do you hear that it's okay to make mistakes from Chef Massimo's story and how that inspired his cracked dessert, but it's also moving to know that Chef Massimo employs people with special needs and grandmas to make tortellini, which is always sold out. Do you have a favorite episode or ingredient?
What do you think, Jeremy?
I mean, I think that the rice, I think it's amazing when we go into rice, because it's Mochi's origin story. It's about who he is. And we've just found that was really emotional. And then we also got to go and hang out with Michael Twitty, who's this incredible food historian, who traces food through his ancestors and traces them through his enslaved ancestors. And that's like what he won the James Beard Award for that. And he wrote this incredible book, and we met with him, and it was very scary going in and being like, okay, we're going to bring this concept into our kids show. But it was really important to everybody. And Michael Twitty is like the greatest educator in the world, and was able to talk about this stuff in a really, really accessible way, so that you can understand where our food comes from. And it's not a great place. There's a lot of really horrifying things about where our food comes from. And he really made that accessible for kids. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, my son loves the introduction song and will not allow anyone to skip it. So how did the team come up with the lyrics?
The lyrics are pretty simple. I don't think there are many. They're just listen to your vegetables and eat your parents, which came out of our original short film back in the day. Our puppet hosts kind of fumble their sign off. And that sentence, that kind of wordplay, or I know there's a technical term for it, but it's not a spoonerism, but it's
like a spoonerism, but yeah.
We just love that. That was like an artifact from the first round of this universe that really captured the kind of rebellious punk rock spirit that we wanted to imbue in our show overall, because we were going to tackle food in a way that, we didn't really see being tackled or addressed, especially in education for kids, around food education for kids. So keeping that in our show was really part of the show. And in fact, it was the original title of the show. And at some point along the way, Netflix kind of pulled us aside and said, yeah, you might want to think about renaming the show. It's a long title. It has a pretty heavy duty character count on the platform. But so Jeremy and I, as the rebellious kids in the back of the classroom would, we shoved it right into the theme song so that they couldn't get rid of it. Yeah.
But that feeling of listen to your vegetables and eat your parents, which was, the reason why we went out when we pitched the show, that was the title, is because we wanted it to, I think, really grab people. And we want this show to feel, honestly, when we look back at what Bourdain did to food, I mean, I don't think that was necessarily conscious in that moment, but maybe it was, where it feels rebellious and punk rock to be traveling around and eating. It's exciting and fun and a little, badass. And we wanted this kids to feel that way, because we really didn't want this to feel like a really sweet educational show. We wanted to make eating like vegetables rad, and like that's good, you know, like that was the goal. That was our dream. So that's where that came from.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely working and inspiring my kids. I mean, not only did they want to eat your parents, but like it was just so playful and creative, and it gives us a different platform to have a conversation about food and how it brings us together as a family. And you know, and even if a kid doesn't like it in a certain way, we can find a different way for them to try it and for them to enjoy it, and that they shouldn't be afraid to try different foods or different things. So, well, you know, what has the reaction of the show been like? You know, were there any responses that positively surprised you?
I mean, I love haunting Waffles and Mochi's Instagram page. You can follow them at Waffles and Mochi Official on Instagram. I am surprised at how much art we started getting, and so we started captioning it with Fan Art Friday, and it's like every week we get this new pile of both grown-ups and kids, you know, drawing Waffles and Mochi. I mean, it gets really creative, and it's so fun to just see people engaging with the show around the world, around the country, from places that feel unexpected sometimes. You know, it's not just, you know, LA and New York. Like Waffles and Mochi have fans everywhere. It's really cool to see families connecting in a way around fresh food that I think will surprise you. I think there's just a universal demand for this kind of approach to eating. You know, we've all, I think, especially during the pandemic, gotten closer to our kitchens and our Cuisine Arts, and maybe we're growing herbs in our, you know, kitchen windows now. So I think food is taking on a new meaning in everyone's life, and it's fun that Waffles and Mochi have a conversation. They can continue to have a conversation with our fans and families.
Yeah. I love following the Instagram page because there's so many creative people submitting their pictures, you know, from different birthday cakes and different characters on top of the cakes, or knitting and crocheting blankets or quilts and shirts and things like that. It's so inspiring to see it motivate people and motivate them to get creative and use different types of tools. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons we love puppets, is because anyone can make a puppet at home. And so just seeing people get crafty, not only in the kitchen, but just like go to their sock drawer is just really cool.
Oh yeah, I did see some like sock puppets. People would make their own. So I love that idea. And
that was also something very much by design, and something that I had a lot of experience with Drunk History, is making the aesthetic feel like accessible. Like we kept in Waffles' hand rods. That was a very conscious decision that Henson does not do. They either paint them out or never let them above the side of the camera. But there's a lot of VFX work in Henson stuff, painting rods out. And that was like, no, we want this to feel, it doesn't have to feel like pure magic. We like a little bit of this roughness. You know, we have models where you can see the strings hanging, and a lot of that stuff. We really like that. I think that makes the whole thing feel more inviting.
Yeah, it does. You know, my son would intentionally point that out and say, you can see the rods, you can see the sticks. And it's like, well, yeah, these are, you know, these need to be controlled by puppeteers. And it just kind of opened up his mind that everything wasn't animated and hidden.
That's what it was when we were kids. When we were kids,
right?
You could see a lot more of the seams in this stuff. So.
Yeah. So what were some interesting lessons you learned from creating Waffles and Mochi?
I think I'll go back to just its 15 or 16-year evolution. I think as a Virgo who can sort of hold on to ideas and, you know, get really kind of tight around ideas. I think for me, the lesson was, you know, revisiting something, learning that, you know, if it didn't work the first time, yeah, maybe the timing isn't right, but maybe also the idea needs adjustment or a little revision. Also collaborating. I mean, not only just between Jeremy and me, I mean, passing that deck back and forth was so fun, but also just letting our idea into the hands of hundreds of people. I mean, it takes a village to make waffles and mochi, and everyone brings a piece of themselves, which may not have been how Jeremy and I saw it in our mind's eye, but the additive nature of our process just has created, I think, just such a special thing. That's my lesson, is just letting go a little bit of your ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, you know, this idea that that like an idea can, especially if it's a good idea, right? Like getting kids to back into the kitchen, which was your original thing that you know, that kernel is a really important kernel. Like that's a great cause and a great thing to want to do. And I think like when you have something like that, yeah, like you just letting those seeds germinate in different ways and different people, and how it came together is so strange, but also so beautiful. And it's been the story of my entire career, is always been the things that I thought the path that I thought I was going down, or the things that I was trying to make didn't get made. And then the things that I was kind of just like having fun with my friends are the things that did get made. I always think that's a really amazing lesson that has happened over and over and over again to me. So I don't know if everyone has that, but I've definitely experienced that a number of times.
Yeah, I think that's so encouraging for us to hear, and also for the viewers to hear. There must be so many people that come up with their own ideas who maybe just hide it away in a little drawer and don't revisit it, and actually don't talk to other people about it. So I think it's really beautiful how your collaboration and your partnership really blossomed, and how you built this team, and maybe the way you wrote it and proposed it wasn't the vision that Mrs. Obama had, and then you included her, and it just, you know, grew into this huge project. So I think it can resonate with a lot of people who have different projects that they haven't seen come to fruition yet. So, you know, I think it'd be great to hear what advice you might give someone who is writing or developing their own idea.
I think the key is to bring other people in. I think it not only expands your point of view, it expands your network. I mean, taking risks and asking people to join your cause or your team will only enrich the project. I mean, Jeremy, when we ran into each other at Little Dom's, you said very much in passing, like, I wish that show was on the air. And then I went home and I like Facebook messaged you. I was like, why would I let that invitation?
You mean you Gmailed me?
Yeah, I think just paying attention to invitations. It's not even just opportunities, because I don't want to sort of put it in that box. It's just invitations to talk. And then Jeremy and I got dinner, and out of that came a whole new branch of the tree. It just like sprouted out of nowhere. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. So I think just working with other people and talking with other people, don't feel so alone, especially since we're all kind of locked away at home, working remotely. It definitely is a key to moving your idea forward. So in wrapping up, and before we go to Q&A, I'd love to hear how we can cook some of the things that we just watched.
There will be a cookbook coming out soon. I think you can even pre-order, but I'm not sure. Can you pre-order it, Erika? You can go on Amazon and pre-order, or another.
Why don't you Google it? The Waffles and Mochi cookbook.
In the meantime, though, if you're feeling really like you want to eat right now, we actually have most of the recipes that are from the show. The cookbook has a lot of other recipes. Most of the show recipes live on wafflesandmochi.org, which is also a website for Partnership for a Healthier America, where they're giving out meals across America and fundraising and doing a lot of other great work. So
great. Well, I will be sure to check that out and try and attempt to make some of Chef Samin's or Chef Massimo's recipes. So we're going to go ahead and queue up some of our questions. We do have a few from the audience. The first is from Michael. He's asking, Jeremy, who's easier to work with, children or drunk comedians?
I've done a lot of both now. I would definitely choose children any day. They're much more delightful than drunk comedians. I always used to say that people talk about the ABCs of filmmaking, where there were animals, boats, and children were the three things to avoid, and I would say D, drunk people, are also the thing to avoid. But now that you're saying that, I would put the A, B, D, then C. Children is probably the easiest of those four.
Awesome.
What about puppets? What about the P?
I'll never work with puppets again. That was a nightmare. No, I like puppets. They're great. I want to work with puppets all the time. They're pretty great. They're really fun to work with. They just take a lot of time.
Yeah, I mean, I will mention, even though it was intentional for you guys, it made such a difference to see the food, the liquid, the soups, the colors get all over their fingers and their mouths. So I thought it was playful and important, an important detail. All right, next question.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Erika.
Oh, no, I was going to say, somehow, not by design, we ended up with only foods that were very stewy, gooey, soupy, saucy. Somehow our puppets only interact with the messiest foods.
But food is messy. And I think you should not be afraid to get messy. When you're baking and there's flour everywhere, that's part of the process. Salt is being thrown in the air. And I think it's okay to let go and to get a little messy. So,
especially with kids, yeah.
Yes, definitely. All right, so next question is coming from Farah. Any advice for folks on how to be patient when their idea is initially killed off? How do you know when to keep pushing your idea or to move on to the next?
I think you always move on to the next, right? That's the lesson, I think. Don't be precious. I think that's the lesson, is like, you can't be precious. You can't have one idea and that's it. You have to just keep putting stuff out there and then go and revisit it. It's a cycle. It's how it all works. And I've heard this from a lot of different people is they make stuff, it doesn't happen. When you look at all the mega successful people, when someone like starts getting really successful, you always start hearing about ideas. It's like Taika Waititi is making this idea that he had when he was 22 and things like that, where you're like, yeah, because all those people, they start getting successful. They start reaching back into all those amazing projects they've had for years. And that's where a lot of that comes from, are ideas that didn't happen the first time around.
Yeah.
It's true. I think it's a misnomer. Ideas don't die. They're always there. It's like how New Yorkers live with their closets. Like, I'm cycling my summer wardrobe, to the top of the shelf, in winter, and vice versa. Like, you don't throw anything out. You keep it. It may just live in the back of the closet for a while, and then you're going to be so excited when you find it again.
I should not have said that our ideas were killed off. I should have just said that they were in like a medically induced coma, or like they were napping for a very long time. I don't know.
The Rip Van Winkle of ideas.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I think we only have time for one more question before we close. It's from David. The show treats the kids' audience as being much more mature than is usual for shows aimed at those age groups. How did you make trade-offs of speaking to kids without talking down to them?
I'll say that one of the ways that we got away with that a lot of the time was by hearkening, is that the right word? Talking about Pixar, and just kept saying, like, well, Pixar is doing it. Pixar can do it. Even though we're obviously not a Pixar film, but we felt very much like we wanted a show. Most importantly, this is a show that is a call to action. This is a show that is asking parents and kids to go into the kitchen. This is not a show where you are putting it on and the kid is just sitting watching mindlessly. Like, they obviously can do that, but ultimately the show's a call to action, saying, let's everybody, now that the show's over, now we all begin the adventure in the kitchen. And because of that, we needed something that was also going to be appealing to adults. So we brought in a lot of writers from the comedy world. A lot of the two of the writers in our room were actually former drunk comedians on Drunk History. We brought in people to make the parents enjoy the show as well. That was super important to us.
Yeah. Well, it definitely worked because it got us all hooked. After watching the first one, you didn't want to stop and you wanted to just keep going. So the kids just wanted to binge watch all of them. Well, on behalf of Talks at Google, many thanks to Erika and Jeremy for sharing your journey and for creating Waffles and Mochi. If you haven't seen the show yet, I encourage you to host a watch party. And if you've already seen it, like my kids, they love to rewatch and sing, listen to your vegetables and eat your parents with waffles and mochi.
That was great, Julie.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.